So today we are going to begin aggregate expenditures. So if you remember, prior to the exam, we spent a lot of time learning about terms, learning how to calculate GDP and GDP growth. What we want to start thinking about now is one of those big questions I mentioned way back when we were first starting macroeconomics, and it was how to prevent recessions. And so we're going to start off with some thinking about recessions. We're going to start thinking about what causes them, how to prevent them. So that's what we're going to start off with here. We're going to think about the motivation and foundations for what we're going to be doing the next several classes. Essentially, what I'm going to do is we're going to sort of see some stuff that seems a little bit scattered. Maybe it's a little hard to understand how it all ties together. Just give us a couple of days, and then hopefully you'll understand why we had to learn all of this in order to start getting at some of the big questions about recessions and growth. So going back to what we learned about equilibrium, one of the things we said is that most markets move toward an equilibrium. So we think that there is going to be no shortage or surplus, that the prices will adjust. So we say markets clear. So remember, everyone who wants the good can get it. Everyone who wants to sell it can get one. This also applies to the market for labor. So what we think should happen is that wages should adjust. Remember, wages are the price of labor, so that everyone who wants a job can get one. So this is the sort of classical idea of economics. Markets are great. Anytime that we allow a market, prices will adjust so that we don't have anyone who is left out looking for a job or any company wanting to hire who can't have one. I have a Discord now? That seems way cooler. I knew there was a group me, but now that I'm on Discord, that's really something. You know what's funny is all three of my classes have had people wondering about their group chat. I'm not sure why this, like, if people like panicked after the exam and they want to get, more into it, or if they're really mad at me and want to have somewhere to vent. Anyway, so all three classes, people have been looking for a group chat again. I thought that was interesting. So a little bit of history. The Great Depression challenged many principles of classical economics because, again, last slide showed that we think that we should just have prices adjust, so wages adjust, so that the market for labor clears. Well, the Great Depression, did not have the market for labor clearing. We had lots of people who wanted jobs but were left off. So this pink area right here is the Great Depression. The height of the bars are unemployment rate. You'll see in the Great Depression, there was something like 25% unemployment. So you imagine 25% of people who wanted a job couldn't find one. That market is not clearing. So what should happen is that we would expect by classical economics, lots of people want jobs. They bid the price of labor down until eventually the wages have fallen low enough that the market clears. So there's fewer people looking for jobs, and there are more people who have a job, or there are more companies who want to hire. Well, why is that not happening? Why are we not getting the wages to adjust? Why do wages not fall enough? And as you would probably expect, when unemployment increases, GDP falls. So if we think about the analogy we had of our whole country reduced to a factory that's producing all that stuff, cars and pizza and everything else, well, if not as many people are going into the factory, if all these people can't get a job in the factory, well, then the factory's not going to produce as much. So in 1936, British economist John Maynard Keynes, you probably heard of him, published a book that had an innovative take on the problems of the Great Depression. His key theory was that high unemployment and low GDP were caused by low expenditures, whereas higher expenditures would lead factories to hire more workers and produce more output. Lower expenditures led factories to fire workers, produce less output, right? So if no one's spending money, then factories aren't going to be able to hire people because there's going to be no one who is looking to produce the stuff the factories make. So Keynes's recommendation is we need to figure out a way to increase expenditures. If we can increase expenditures, if we can get people or governments spending money, then we'll be able to end the Great Depression. So how do we increase expenditures? Well, if you remember from GDP, when we learned about GDP, total expenditures, aggregate expenditures are equal to consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Aggregate expenditures are equal to all this. We are going to set NX equal to 0. It just simplifies things. We'll sort of imagine we have a closed economy. So that means is if we increase any type of spending, increasing any type of spending, C, I, or G, will cause aggregate expenditures to increase. Firms will have to produce more output to meet the demand. This will lead to a decrease in unemployment and an increase in GDP, right? So if we figure out a way to, for example, increase G. So we're in a depression, government goes out and spends a ton of money building roads. Well, all the companies that are used in building roads are gonna have to go hire people. That'll decrease unemployment. Our factory is gonna start spitting out roads, producing roads, so our GDP will go up. So, a couple of key assumptions of our model. First is that prices are fixed. And so right away, this seems off, right? Like you see this, you're like, well, the whole thing about equilibrium is prices adjusting. So this is talking about the short run. So in a short period of time, we think of prices are being fixed. Now, a more realistic rephrasing of this is that prices take some time to adjust. Imagine you own a restaurant and your costs go up. Well, what we think should happen is your prices will go up, right? So, the price of tomatoes went up, so the price of my spaghetti sauce should go up 2 cents. And, prices went down, my costs went down, so I'm going to reduce the cost of my spaghetti today by 3 cents. Well, you're not actually doing that every day, right? There would be literal costs involved with printing new menus. So we call those menu costs. So in general, we want to think about the idea that adjusting prices takes a little bit of time. We're not going to change our prices every single time a cost changes. The other assumption is that certain expenditures are independent of income. So that's going to be necessities like food and shelter, right? So whatever your income is, you're always going to be buying food and shelter. You'll borrow money if you have to. And this is what I was talking about. Some of this seems a little disjointed and we're not exactly sure why I care about these assumptions, why I told you about them. So just sort of, you make sure you have them in the workbook, just kind of put them in the back of your mind and we'll come back to them later. But it's usually nice to, whenever we start a new model, to think about the underlying assumptions of it. So we're talking about aggregate expenditures. Well, a $100 increase in consumption means a $100 increase in aggregate expenditures, which means a $100 increase in GDP. So someone asked about the relationship between aggregate expenditures and GDP. Well, if you remember, when we learned about calculating GDP, the way that we did it was using the aggregate expenditures formula. So GDP equals aggregate expenditures, consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. So how do we expect an individual consumer to respond to an increase in income? So what do we think is going to happen to you if you get an increase in income? So we ask this question now because think about what we said so far is we're in a depression. We want to increase GDP. We increase GDP by increasing aggregate expenditures because they're basically the same. They're the same. All right. Well, we increase aggregate expenditures by increasing any of them. Well, think about increasing consumption. How do I get you to increase your consumption? If I want you to, if I'm trying to make my economy grow and I want you to spend $100 on pizza, what do I need to do? You want me to spend more money? Give me more money. And so we're going to increase your income. How do I expect you to respond to an increase in your income? And that brings us to marginal propensities to consume and save. Let me go ahead. I think some people were still writing these. Remember your exam grade, you may be seeing it out of 32. So if you got like a 20, it's probably a 20 out of 32 and not a 20%. All right, so start off with learn a couple of terms. You take your income, subtract the taxes you pay. What's left is what we call disposable income. Now notice, disposal doesn't mean you can throw it away. It's not just sort of extra money you have lying around. It's defined as income minus taxes. So the money you're spending on your house and on your food, all of that counts as disposable income. So again, disposable income is just how much is left in your paycheck after you've paid all the taxes. All right, well, that's your income. Call that Y. That's used for either consumption or savings. So when you get that check, you can do two things with the money. Consumption is anything spent now. We call that C. Savings, or S, is money that is not spent now. So again, of the money you get, you do two things with it. You either consume or save. You either spend it now or you save it for later. So marginal propensity. So we saw that, you might not have known what those terms, right? They kind of seemed like very jargony when you saw that slide. Well, marginal, we love talking about marginal things, right? Marginal is the use of the next dollar. So if you get one more dollar, I'm going to think about that one more dollar. Propensity is the inclination or tendency to do something. That's the definition of propensity. So what marginal propensity does is it answers the question, how do you tend to spend your next dollar? So marginal propensity to consume is the fraction of each additional dollar of income that is spent on consumption. Marginal propensity to consume, delta equals delta C, which is your change in consumption, how much your consumption changes, divided by delta Y, which is your change in income, how much your income changes. So let's try a question. You receive a $500 bonus from your job. You're excited to receive this bonus. You go out with your friends that night and spend $100 of it doing something outside, socially distant. Sit around a campfire or something. What is your marginal propensity to consume? Is 20%. Delta C divided by delta Y. You spent an extra 100 out of an extra 500, so you spend 20% of your extra income. Marginal propensity to save, that's the fraction of each additional dollar of income that is saved. Marginal propensity to save equals change in S, that's your change in savings, divided by your change in income. Question, you receive a $500 bonus from your job. You're excited to receive the bonus, go with your friends tonight and spend $100. Same setup. What is your marginal propensity to save? Good, your marginal propensity to save was 80%. How do we get there? Well, what you saved was everything you didn't spend. So you started off extra $500, you spent 100 of it, everything else is saved, so you saved 400, which is 80% of that money you got. So summarizing, your marginal propensity to save is how much of your extra income is saved. Marginal propensity to consume, how much of that extra income is consumed. Well, those are the only two things you can do with your income. So the marginal propensity to save plus the marginal propensity to consume has to equal 1, 100%. And that worked for us here. We saved 20%, we spent 20%, saved 80%, so in total, 100%. The last equation is true because all income is either spent or saved. Next, we are going to think more about consumption and how it relates to income. So this is a graph. On the y-axis, we have consumptions. That's how much money you're spending. X-axis is disposable income. So again, that's how much money is in your paycheck. So first question is, I drew this 45-degree line out. Notice that at this 45-degree line, I'm staring into infinity there, weren't we? Not sure why that happened. Kind of cool though, right? So, on this 45-degree line, means that if this is 10, this is 10. This disposable income is 10, consumption is 10. Should look like that. All right. Points on the dashed line represent areas where. So what's so special about the points on that dashed line? The answer is B.
The answer is B.
Wow. Is that what I sounded? I think I may have. Did I accidentally, instead of muting everyone, hit the thing where I requested everyone to come off mute?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes, you
Sure. What's that?
Wait, I just did it. I just muted you all. Now there. Now anyone unmuting is voluntarily unmuting. All right. So the answer here is B. All income is spent on consumption. What does that mean? Well, I really tried to give this one away. So if we think about a point like this, again, this is I have $10 in disposable income, and I spend all of it. $10 in disposable income, $10 in consumption expenses. Next question, which of these 3 points is most likely to represent a college student? Well, point A is going to be a point where your income is relatively low and your spending is relatively high. This is why people save up for college and why people borrow money for college. You don't have a lot of income, you do have a lot of expenses, so you're spending a lot. Okay, so let me go back. Just a minute. I will go back to the previous top hat. This one. So questions were all income is spent on consumption. I mean, I guess that could say all disposable income is spent on consumption. We're sort of simplifying things and sort of taking taxes away for now. So yeah, that could have been simplified, but none of the other ones are. So definitely the other ones are wrong. So again, marginal propensity to consume equals marginal propensity to save. That would mean you save half your income. Here, we're spending all of it. All income is saved. That would mean the opposite of this. That would mean just if you earn 10, that consumption was 0, and then income is 0 is also not true. Okay. So yeah, I guess I could have said disposable income, or I could have earlier in the slides said that for now we're assuming disposable income is 0. Next, we will think about consumption and income and how they relate. So we expect an increase in income to lead to some increase in consumption. So we think that the marginal propensity to consume should be greater than 0, right? So I think that if I give you $100, you're going to spend at least some of it. And going back to that assumption from earlier, so we think there's a positive relationship between income and consumption. This is just sort of restating this. So when income goes up, your consumption goes up because you're spending at least some of it. An income of 0 will not mean no consumption. So we're going to think about you're going to have to buy food and shelter even if your income goes away. What do? You use savings or borrowing to buy the necessities. So let's go ahead. We can graph these. We could sort of take all of this and throw it onto this graph here. This is our consumption and disposable income graph. So consumption at no income is this point A. This is you have no income, you're still spending a little bit of money, and it's going to look like that. And then you take your income. Did it again. Take your income. I need to set the hot. I thought I had a hotkey set for muting everyone, but apparently it sometimes tells you all to unmute. All right, so no income, we're going to be at this point. So this is, I have no income, but I'm going to figure out some way. I'm going to, pull the money that's under my pillow. I'm going to go borrow it from a friend. I'm going to figure out some way to buy food and shelter. Then I get a little bit of income. Then I get some income. And I'm going to spend some of it. I'm not going to spend it all because I generally will save at least some. At least that's our sort of on average how we expect people to behave. Okay. So then I get some more income. And every time I get more income, I spend some of it, save the rest. More income, spend some, save the rest, and so on. We connect all those points. And we get our consumption schedule. And in case you, this is like a real thing that gets calculated. So in 2015, it was estimated that autonomous spending, that is spending that even if you don't have an income, autonomous spending right here was $16,000 per household. So we expect that with no income, people will spend around $16,000. And the marginal propensity to consume was 0.67. So on average, if you give someone an extra dollar, they'll spend 2/3 of it. Again, if you're spending more than your income, it's either because you borrowed money to do so, or you took some money you had saved, or magic. So a consumption schedule relates an individual's income to her consumption. How does this idea here relate to GDP? So what I want to do is take this and see how it relates to GDP. Well, in equilibrium, so we're going to sort of throw some facts and reasoning out here for you. We know that net savings and net borrowing are zero. So why this is because all the money that you borrow, someone else is loaning to you. So think about it. For every saver, there's a borrower. For every borrower, there's someone loaning it to them. So we think that in equilibrium, net savings and net borrowing are zero. So if you're borrowing $60,000 for college, there's someone somewhere else who's got $60,000 they're looking to do something with, and they're loaning you the $60,000. So that's one thing in equilibrium. The next thing that we want to say is true in equilibrium is everything that's produced is purchased and used by someone. So we're making this sort of assumption that we're focusing on consumption here. We're thinking that everything that's made, someone's going to buy it. In equilibrium, we're not building up a big inventory. We're not making stuff for no reason. So we think that in equilibrium, consumption is equal to disposable income. So again, all the money that's earned, it's getting spent by someone. if you're saving it, someone else is borrowing it. And we think that all of that money that's spent, we're going to say that it's spent on consumption. Why is that? Well, got two assumptions. First is taxes are zero, which means that disposable income is equal to income. Our next assumption is that all the other components of GDP are zero. It's really not it's doesn't really matter much for what we're doing now. We will eventually allow I and G to be something else, but for now we're going to say that all of those are zero. And we're just going to say that consumption then is equal to GDP. Again, we go from our aggregate expenditures formulation of GDP. From that, we can see that if all these other components are zero, then that simplifies to GDP is just consumption. So now we can draw that. That is what the 45-degree line means. I sort of threw it out there as just to try to help us get an understanding of how to read this graph. Now we can see that in equilibrium, we're going to be on this 45-degree line because everything that is produced is going to be consumed by someone. Okay, so real GDP should be equal to consumption. This is true in equilibrium. Now what we're going to do is relate the economy as a whole to people's individual behavior. So C is going to be your individual behavior. What we said was that start off, even with no income, you're going to spend, whatever I said, $16,000. Your income goes up. Every dollar, you're going to spend 2/3 of it. So this is you. Then the 45-degree line, you can think of it as that's the economy as a whole. This is going to be true in equilibrium. And so this point here we're going to see is going to be relevant because it's a point where everyone is behaving as we expect them to behave and the economy is in equilibrium. So I'll go back to here because there was more words. And then I'll say, just as a reminder, this right here is the economy in equilibrium. This is going to be an individual. So I will go ahead. We will end there for now. Thank you all for your attention. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you back here on Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
Back.